June 2024. Clay County, Iowa. A stretch of heartland where cornfields ripple like ocean waves and time moves slower than anywhere else. For more than 70 years, the county fairgrounds has stood at the edge of the town of Spencer. Every August, it fills with laughter, fried food, the metallic clang of carnival rides, and the low hum of country music drifting across the fields. Generations have grown up here. First kisses behind the Ferris wheel, first beers in pickup trucks, and countless dusty summer nights that smelled of popcorn and diesel. But this summer is different. The fairgrounds are closed for renovations, new drainage systems, new roads, new lighting. And part of that project means draining the old retention pond, a shallow, weedy stretch of water north of the main fairground lot. No one really remembers when it was built. Some say it was in the 40s. Others claim the 50s. It's been there for as long as anyone's been alive. A calm, brown-green pool that reflects the Iowa sky and the fair's fireworks each summer. On June 9, 2024, county workers set up industrial pumps and started lowering the water level. By the morning of June 12th, most of the pond's surface had turned to mud. That's when Foreman Dale Yates saw it. At first, it looked like a tractor axle or maybe a piece of old farm machinery half buried in silt. But as the water kept dropping, the outline sharpened, a roof line, curved fenders, chrome glinting faintly under decades of grime. It was a car, and not just any car, one from the late 50s by the look of its shape. Yates radioed his crew to stop the pumps. "We got something down here," he said, his voice tight, curious but uneasy. Within hours, deputies from the Clay County Sheriff's Department had arrived. Yellow tape went up. News spread faster than prairie fire. By mid-afternoon, there were TV vans lined along County Road 18. Reporters sweating under the Iowa sun, their microphones reflecting the light. The sheriff, Elaine Harper, stood by the pond's edge with a clipboard and sunglasses, staring at the shape beneath the water. "What do you think?" one of the deputies asked. She didn't answer, because deep down, everyone in Spencer already had the same thought, or rather, the same memory. That story, the one whispered for decades at barbecues and family gatherings, about the young couple who vanished after the county fair in 1958, James Holloway and Clara Mitchell. They were never found. By sunset, the pumps resumed, slower this time, controlled. The air smelled like mud and oil and something older, like history being unearthed. When the last of the water was gone, what remained was a 1956 Chevy Bel Air, two-tone blue and white, resting perfectly upright in the silt. Its chrome had dulled to gray, its windshield cracked and opaque. The sheriff's department called in a dive team from Sioux City. Though the water was barely knee-deep now, the mud was treacherous, sticky, thick like glue. The divers used tethers and boards to reach the driver's side door. Sheriff Harper stood on the shore, arms crossed. "Get me photos before you touch anything." The first diver knelt beside the window, wiped away a film of mud, and froze. "Ma'am," he said quietly to the radio, there's someone inside." The official recovery took 3 days. Every move was recorded, every artifact tagged. Inside the Chevy, investigators found 2 sets of remains, one in the driver's seat, the other leaning toward the passenger door. The skeletal hand still rested near the steering wheel. In the glove compartment, they found an old tube of lipstick, rusted coins, and a ticket stub. Clay County Fair, August 16, 1958. By the following morning, the discovery had gone viral. Hashtag Spencer Mystery trended on Twitter. Local news anchors replayed drone footage of the pond from every angle. Reporters dug up old microfilm headlines. Local couple missing after fair. No leads in search for Holloway and Mitchell. August 18, 1958. Spencer Daily Reporter. Those words hadn't been printed in over 60 years. Now they were everywhere. At the Clay County Courthouse, Sheriff Harper held a press briefing. Her voice was calm but heavy. "We can confirm that the vehicle recovered from the fairgrounds pond is a 1956 Chevrolet Bel Air, license plate Iowa 7K 4231. Preliminary records indicate it was registered to a James Holloway of Spencer, reported missing in August 1958, along with his companion, Clara Mitchell." The remains discovered inside the vehicle are believed to be consistent with two adult individuals, but identification will take time. When she finished, the reporters shouted questions. Is foul play suspected? Why wasn't Pond searched back then? Do you believe this solves the Holloway Mitchell case? She looked into the cameras for a long moment before answering. Sometimes, she said, the truth doesn't hide. It just sinks and waits. That night, as the headline spread, the phone rang in a modest house on the east side of Spencer. Evelyn Carter, 82 years old, sat at her kitchen table surrounded by photo albums. She was Clara Mitchell's younger cousin, one of the few people still alive who remembered the couple. She listened quietly as her granddaughter read her the article from the Des Moines Register. When the girl finished, Evelyn whispered, "I told them all. I told them they never ran away." Then she closed her eyes, and for the first time in 65 years, she cried. Meanwhile, in a nursing home 15 miles away, another man watched the news in silence. Henry Holloway, James's younger brother, now 91, stared at the TV screen, showing the crane lifting the mud-caked Chevy from the pond. His gnarled hands trembled slightly on his walker. For decades, he believed the town's version, that his brother had fled after a fight with their father, leaving everything behind. He whispered to no one, "Jimmy, you didn't leave, did you?" When the car was finally hauled out of the pond and onto a flatbed, the crowd that had gathered fell silent. The metal groaned, dripping with muddy water, as if exhaling after half a century underwater. A local reporter described it best. It was like watching a ghost rise, not a haunting, but a homecoming. By week's end, forensic analysts confirmed what everyone already knew in their hearts. The remains were indeed those of James Holloway, age 25, and Clara Mitchell, age 23, missing since August 16, 1958. Their cause of death, drowning, consistent with an accidental submersion. The case, unsolved for 66 years, was now officially closed. But in Spencer, Iowa, closure didn't come easily, because every family, every old-timer, every soul who'd once walked the fairgrounds that summer night, they all had a version of the story. Some swore the couple had argued. Others believed they'd eloped. Some whispered darker theories, that James's father had something to do with it. And now, with the car pulled from the mud and the bones returned to daylight, the town found itself asking a new question. If the truth had been sitting under our feet for 66 years, what else had we refused to see? In the summer of 1958, Spencer, Iowa was the kind of place Norman Rockwell might have painted. Neat rows of maple trees, milk trucks on morning routes, and the distant hum of tractors across the plains. It was a town where everyone knew everyone, where gossip traveled faster than the mail, and where reputations, good or bad, clung to families for generations. And in that town lived James Holloway. At 25, James was what people called a solid young man. He worked dawn to dusk on his father's farm just outside of town, 280 acres of corn, soybeans, and cattle. He'd inherited his father's broad shoulders and his mother's steady blue eyes. James had always done what was expected, served in the National Guard, came home when his father fell ill, worked the land, paid the bills, went to church on Sundays. He was dependable, maybe too dependable, because beneath that calm exterior was a restlessness he could never quite explain, a quiet longing for something more than the rhythm of planting and harvest. That something more had a name, Clara Mitchell. Clara worked as a secretary at the Clay County Courthouse. She was 23, with dark auburn hair and a laugh that carried across a room. People said she was too smart for a small town, and they weren't wrong. She'd grown up on the east side of Spencer, daughter of a railroad foreman and a homemaker. After high school, she'd talked about moving to Omaha, maybe even Chicago, but her father's stroke kept her home. That summer, she rented a small room above the pharmacy downtown. On Saturday mornings, she typed letters for local attorneys. On Sunday evenings, she sang in the church choir. And somewhere between the fairgrounds and the feed store, she met James. The first time was at a 4-H livestock show, spring of 1957. James was showing one of his father's prize steers. Clara was there covering the event for the Spencer Daily Reporter. She'd borrowed her cousin's camera, big, clunky heavy, and nearly tripped over a hose while backing up for a shot. James caught her by the elbow. "Careful there," he said with a grin. "City girls and farm hoses don't mix." "I'm not a city girl," she shot back. "Just haven't learned to dodge mud yet." That quick spark between them was unmistakable. Within weeks, they were taking drives after Sunday supper. James behind the wheel his pride and joy, a 1956 Chevy Bel Air, two-tone blue and white with fins that gleamed like wings. He'd saved 2 years to buy it used. They drove country roads lined with fireflies, parked by the river to listen to Patsy Cline on the radio. James would talk about the farm. Clara would talk about everything else. The city she wanted to see, the book she wanted to write, the world beyond Clay County. She made him laugh. He made her feel safe. It was a kind of small-town love story that people noticed and judged. In a town like Spencer, love wasn't just about two people. It was about families, expectations, and whispers at the diner. James's father, Walter Holloway, believed his son's duty was to the farm, not to some courthouse girl with big ideas. Clara's mother thought James was kind, but too tied to his land. They were polite at first. Small smiles, Sunday hellos, but everyone knew both families disapproved quietly. And yet, through the fall and winter of 1957, James and Clara stayed together. He brought her jars of homemade preserves. She surprised him with books from the library, Steinbeck, Faulkner, Kerouac. On cold nights, they'd sit in the Chevy, heater running, watching snow drift across the fields. "Sometimes," Clara said once, tracing the frost on the windshield, "I feel like this whole town is asleep, like we're the only two awake." James smiled. "Then I guess we better stay that way." By the summer of 1958, people assumed they'd get engaged soon. But something had shifted. James's father's health was declining fast. The farm needed more help. Every week brought new bills, new repairs, new pressure. And Clara, she'd started talking again about leaving Spencer. Her friend in Omaha had offered her a job at a law firm. Better pay, bigger world. When she told James, he'd gone quiet. After a long pause, he said, "You'd really leave?" She smiled softly. "You could come with me." "I can't leave the farm, Clara. You know that." "I know," she said. "That's what scares me." By August, their once easy laughter had turned into tension. Still, both insisted on attending the Clay County Fair together. It had always been their thing. The fair was everything small-town America loved about itself. Bright lights, Ferris wheel music, the smell of corn dogs and sawdust. James entered 2 of his father's cattle. Clara volunteered at the ticket booth in the evenings. Everyone saw them there, walking hand in hand through the midway, smiling for photos. But there were moments, small, fleeting, when something darker flickered between them. Witnesses later remembered seeing them near the Ferris wheel around 9 p.m., talking intensely. Clara's voice raised, James's jaw tight. She was crying, one woman recalled, and he looked like he was trying to calm her down. Around 10:30, they were seen leaving the fairgrounds, heading toward the overflow parking area near the north lot, the one that backed up to the drainage pond. A teenage boy working concessions remembered the car clearly. That blue Chevy? Hard to forget. Chrome so shiny you could see her face in it. That was the last time anyone saw them alive. For days afterward, the fairgrounds returned to silence. The Ferris wheel lights went dark. The music stopped. And somewhere beneath the surface of a muddy pond, 2 lives and countless assumptions sank into stillness. But in 1958, nobody thought to look there. The search was frantic at first. Local men combed the highways, dragging the river south of town, checking abandoned barns. State police issued bulletins. But by the end of the first week, the tone had changed. Rumors spread fast. Clara was pregnant. James ran off to Chicago. They fought that night, maybe something happened. By the second week, even the sheriff called it a voluntary disappearance. The town moved on. The Holloway farm went back to work. The Mitchells closed their blinds. And the pond, silent, patient, forgotten, kept its secret. Years later, people still told the story at barbecues. Teenagers dared each other to sneak to the pond at night. Old men shook their heads and said, "Damn shame, What happened to those two? But time dulled everything. Until June 2024, when the Earth finally exhaled and the pond gave them back. August 16th, 1958, the last night of the Clay County Fair. It had been one of those perfect Midwestern evenings. Clear sky, a light breeze, the smell of sugar and smoke and freshly cut hay. The fairgrounds pulsed with energy, children laughing, music blaring from the tilt-a-whirl, the announcer calling winners for the livestock show. Somewhere among the crowd, James Holloway and Clara Mitchell were doing their best to look normal. People saw them everywhere that day. Around 5 p.m., at the cattle barn where James's heifer had taken third place. At 7:30, sharing lemonade and a funnel cake near the main stage. Around 9 o'clock, walking to Midway. She in a yellow sundress, he in a clean white shirt tucked neatly into his jeans. To most onlookers, they looked like any other young couple enjoying the last night of summer. But those who watched closely noticed attention. The smiles that didn't last. The way Clara's eyes darted away when James spoke. By 9:15, they were seen near the Ferris wheel, the same spot where they'd met the previous year. A teenage girl working the ride told police later. She was crying a little. He had his hands in his pockets, like he didn't know what to say. 10 minutes later, a friend of James's, Charlie Bowen, passed him by the parking area. I waved, Charlie said later. Jimmy waved back, but he looked distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. The fair closed at 10:45 p.m. Witnesses recalled the blue and white Chevy pulling out from the overflow lot, turning north toward County Road 18. Headlights cutting through the darkness, then gone. That was it. After that moment, James and Clara disappeared from the face of the earth. By 2 a.m., Clara's parents were awake and worried. By 4 a.m., they'd called the Holloway farm. No one had seen James. At sunrise, Sheriff Ray Gilmore received 2 missing person calls within minutes of each other. In 1958, small-town law enforcement didn't have the resources for large-scale investigations. There was no radio coordination, no instant alerts, no state database. Gilmore assigned 2 deputies, both local boys barely 30, to check the main highways, motels, and bus stations. By noon, they found nothing. No car, no clues, no witnesses beyond the same stories from the fairgrounds. At first, everyone assumed what they wanted to believe, that James and Clara had eloped. It fit the town's logic. A young couple, in love but under pressure, deciding to run off to start fresh somewhere else. The sheriff told reporters, "We have no evidence of foul play at this time. Most likely, they've left town of their own accord." That single statement sealed the case's fate. Volunteers searched the back roads, but only half-heartedly. James's father, Walter, drove the county line every night, staring into ditches for skid marks. Clara's mother pinned her daughter's photograph to the bulletin board at the courthouse. Local papers ran headlines. Young couple missing after fair. Authorities suspect elopement. No one thought to check the pond. It wasn't on the map. Just a low patch of land north of the fairground, surrounded by cattails and deep grass. In daylight it looked harmless, like a puddle that overstayed its welcome. At night, it was a black mirror. Within a month, the rumors turned darker. Some said James had gotten Clara pregnant and panicked. Others whispered she wanted to leave, and he couldn't handle it. Then came the cruelest theory, that James had killed her, hidden her body, and skipped town. By winter, that version had stuck. The town needed a villain, and James wasn't around to defend himself. The Holloways withdrew from public life. Walter stopped attending church. People said he looked 10 years older. The Mitchells refused to move Clara's belongings. Her mother kept her bedroom the same, a yellow bedspread, a photo of the two of them at the fair the summer before. Every Christmas, she placed a wrapped gift on Clara's bed. By early 1959, Sheriff Gilmore closed the investigation due to lack of new evidence. The file, 10 pages of typed notes, 3 black and white photos, and a newspaper clipping, was shoved into a metal drawer in the basement of the courthouse. It stayed there for decades. Once in a while, a rookie deputy would stumble across it, dust it off, skim the report, and ask, "Whatever happened to those kids?" The older deputies always gave the same answer. They ran off. That's all. Time, as it does, smoothed over the rough edges. By the mid-1960s, the fairgrounds had expanded. A new midway was built, the livestock barns replaced. The pond remained, mostly ignored, a convenient runoff basin that grew murkier every year. Walter Holloway died in 1971, still believing his son had abandoned him. His wife followed 2 years later. Their remaining son, Henry, inherited the farm and the quiet shame that came with the Holloway name. The Mitchells moved to Sioux City in 1975. Clara's mother stopped mentioning her daughter's name in church. By the 1980s, the story of the missing couple had become a kind of folklore, the town's ghost story. Teenagers dared each other to go to the fairgrounds pond after midnight. They said if you stood on the north bank long enough, you'd hear music from the fair echoing through the trees, or see headlights moving slowly under the surface of the water. No one believed it, but no one completely didn't either. In 1994, a man came forward claiming he'd seen the couple hitchhiking near Des Moines back in '58. Another said he'd sold gas to someone driving a blue Chevy weeks later. The sheriff's office followed up, but the details never matched. The license plate was off. The timeline was wrong. Still, each new rumor reopened old wounds. Every few years, someone would publish an article in the Spencer Reporter. Whatever happened to fairground lovers? Each piece ended the same way. The disappearance of James Holloway and Clara Mitchell remains one of Iowa's enduring mysteries. By the time the 21st century arrived, the people who had known James and Clara were mostly gone. The fair continued, bigger rides, louder music, deep-fried everything. New generations parked their trucks where the old overflow lot used to be, never realizing they were standing above a grave of chrome and silence. And under the muddy water, the Chevy rested undisturbed, sealed away in silt, its windows clouded, its passengers still waiting. For 66 years, rain filled the pond each spring and froze it each winter. The seasons passed, fair after fair, laughter echoing above while the past slept below, until the summer of 2024, when the pump started again and the pond remembered. When forensic analysts opened the car in 2024, they found both seat belts latched, an oddity for a couple supposedly running away. The ignition was off, the gear shift in neutral, the headlight switch still flipped to on. They'd driven straight into the darkness and never had time to react. Investigators later reconstructed the scene. On that moonless night in 1958, the overflow lot was unpaved and poorly marked. There were no guardrails, no warning signs. The gravel access road ran parallel to the pond, but a wrong turn in the dark could easily have sent a car rolling down the embankment. The Chevy likely floated for less than a minute before the weight of the engine pulled it under. No one heard the splash. The fair music, the fireworks, the laughter, all louder than the sound of two lives ending. For 66 years, the town of Spencer believed what it wanted to believe, that the couple had left, that young love was fickle, that small towns stay small because their ghosts never come back. But when the car rose from the mud, coated in 60 years of sediment and silence, it forced everyone, the old, the young, the curious, to look at themselves and ask, how many truths had they buried, simply because the lie was easier to live with? The morning after the recovery, the air in Spencer felt heavier. People drove slower down Main Street. Conversations at the diner drifted back, again and again, to the pond. Everyone had a memory, a rumor, a connection, a small detail they'd tucked away for decades. For most, the discovery was a shock. For a few, it was a vindication. And for some, like Henry Holloway, now 91, it was something closer to a confession. Henry sat in the common room of Maple Glen Nursing Home, TV volume low, watching the press conference replay for the third time. On screen, Sheriff Elaine Harper stood at a podium outside the courthouse, the recovered Chevy visible in the background, a ghost wrapped in yellow tape. We can now confirm that the remains are positively identified as James Holloway and Clara Mitchell, she said. Dental records match. Cause of death, accidental drowning. The reporters kept asking about foul play, about missed searches, about who was to blame. But Henry wasn't listening to any of that. He was staring at the screen like a man trying to unlearn 66 years of false belief. All his life, He'd told people his brother had run away. He'd said it to protect himself, to shield his family from shame. But deep down, a small, stubborn part of him had never believed it. Now, seeing the car lifted from the mud, he felt something between grief and relief. The strange release that comes when you realize your guilt was built on sand. He didn't leave, Henry whispered. He never left. His nurse, a young woman named Marcy, placed a hand on his shoulder. "You okay, Mr. Holloway?" He nodded. For the first time in my life, he said, "I think I might be." Across town, Evelyn Carter sat by her window, a cup of tea cooling on the sill. She'd spent the morning answering phone calls, reporters, old friends, strangers who'd found her number. Everyone wanted a quote. Everyone wanted the story. But what Evelyn wanted was something simpler, to tell Clara she'd been right to believe in love, and wrong to believe it could wait. When the news broke, Evelyn had gone up to her attic and opened a cedar chest she hadn't touched in decades. Inside were Clara's letters, tied in ribbon, smelling faintly of perfume and dust. One of them, dated August 14th, 1958, 2 days before the fair, read, "Sometimes I think Jimmy and I see the world from 2 different roads. But I also think maybe those roads meet again somewhere. Maybe not in this life, but somewhere." Evelyn read that line over and over, the words blurring as her eyes filled. For 66 years, those roads had been buried in mud and silence. Now they'd met again. By mid-July, the story had reached national news. "The Fairground mystery solved after 6 decades," read the Chicago Tribune. Cable news stations sent camera crews to film the pond, now drained and cordoned off. Spencer's population doubled overnight. Journalists, tourists, true crime bloggers. The diner ran out of coffee by 9 a.m. The mayor gave interviews about healing and history. Some locals welcomed the attention. Others resented it. "It's not a mystery anymore," one old farmer told a reporter. "It's a tragedy that never got a chance to be mourned." At Sunday service, Pastor Whitaker addressed the congregation directly. "For 60 years, we lived with a story that wasn't true. Maybe we did it because it was easier, maybe because it hurt less. But truth has a way of coming up through the soil, just like spring corn, whether we're ready or not." People nodded, some cried. After the sermon, Henry Holloway sat alone in the back pew, hat in his hands. In late August, almost exactly 66 years to the day they vanished, the town held a joint memorial at First Methodist Church. The service was simple. 2 coffins side by side. A faded photograph of James and Clara placed between them. The church overflowed. People who hadn't set foot inside in years stood in the aisles. The choir sang in the garden. Sheriff Harper attended in uniform. Reporters stayed outside, their cameras respectfully lowered. When it came time for family to speak, Henry struggled to his feet. His hands shook as he gripped the podium. "For 60 years, I believe my brother ran away. He began. I said things about him I can't take back. I taught my children to think less of him. I carried anger that didn't belong to him. It belonged to me." He paused, his voice trembling. "If Jimmy can hear me now, I'm sorry. You stayed. You stayed right here." The silence that followed was heavy, like the whole town was holding its breath. Then, softly, someone began to cry. It was Evelyn Carter. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "Clara always said love doesn't leave. It just waits." I guess she was right. Following the funeral, the Chevy Bel Air was transported to the Iowa Historical Museum for preservation. A team of restorers cleaned the mud, cataloged the artifacts, and created a small exhibit titled The Fairground Lovers. Visitors could stand beside the car, read about the case, and listen to a short audio recording. Voices of those who remembered James and Clara. It wasn't sensational. It wasn't meant to be. It was quiet, respectful. The plaque at the base of the exhibit read, "They left the fair that night and never came home. The town forgot. The pond remembered. And love, even buried deep, found its way back to daylight." The fairgrounds pond was filled in that fall. The county installed a new drainage system and planted wildflowers where the water used to be. In the center of the clearing, a small stone marker was placed, in memory of James Holloway and Clara Mitchell together in life's last moment. together forever after. Every August, fairgoers walked past it, without realizing the weight of the ground beneath their feet. Some stopped to read, some just glance. But for those who know, it's impossible not to feel something, that mix of sadness and peace that only the truth can bring. Months after the story broke, a young journalist from Des Moines named Rachel Timmons wrote a piece that summed up what everyone in Spencer felt but couldn't say. What makes this story remarkable isn't just a mystery that lingered for 66 years or the accident that caused it. It's what it reveals about us, about how we fill silence with speculation, how we turn grief into gossip when the truth is too heavy to hold. The pond didn't hide anything. We did. And when the water drained, it wasn't ghosts that rose from mud. It was guilt, forgiveness, and the fragile grace of remembering what was real. Her article won a state journalism award, but more importantly, it gave the town a voice that sounded like understanding instead of shame. A year later, on a cool summer night, the Clay County Fair opened again. The lights shone bright, the rides hummed, and music filled the air. Near the memorial garden, a young couple stood hand in hand, reading the plaque. The girl traced the engraved names with her fingertip. "You think they were really happy?" she asked. The boy thought for a moment, then said, "I think they were, for as long as they had." Behind them, the Ferris wheel turned slowly, its reflection glowing faintly where the pond once was. A shimmer of light where once there had only been darkness. And for the first time in 66 years, the fair felt whole again,